In this session, part 2, we have 3 presentations. And the first presenter is Aniel Ashton from Southampton University. He will be talking about artificial intelligence, artworks, artists, and art worlds.
Thank you. Yes, good afternoon. I'm Dan Ashton, Professor of Cultural and Creative Industries at Winchester School of Art, which is part of the University of Southampton, where I'm also the co-director of the Work Futures Research Centre and a Policy Fellow at Southampton Institute for Arts and Humanities. Many thanks to Professors Lee and Kawashima for the invitation to be here with you today to explore sustainable cultural futures and for all the wonderful hospitality. Been some really excellent discussion so far, and I'm similarly hoping to contribute. So in this presentation, I'm going to explore artificial intelligence and artistic work. My starting point, though, is to take us out of here for a moment and over to the BBC interactive article from 2015 called "Will a Robot Take Your Job?" And this follows very closely from the discussions we've just been having. A slight interactive participatory element to start. You have a post-it note in front of you. And if for a moment you could write down a job on your post-it note, not necessarily your job, otherwise we'll come up with the same kinds of jobs, but perhaps a family member, a friend, or just a job that comes to mind. And then we'll be able to type that in here and end up with a percentage of probability that your jobs will be taken over by a robot. So I'll give you a moment to think of a job. As soon as you've got one ready, we can start having a play. Lawyer. Thank you. Okay then. I think maybe it's gone for specific things. Should we try solicitor? Yeah. So clicking here, we'll find our automation risk. Quite unlikely, only 3%. So out of 366 possible jobs in the database, we find that your suggestion, the solicitor, is 320th. So quite unlikely at 3%. Any other post-it notes and jobs for me? Well, what kind of consultant? Management consultants and business analysts? Should we go there? Okay. Again, quite unlikely. Only 7%. 298th. Musician. Okay. 311th. Quite unlikely. So I think the 3 examples we've given then are at the quite unlikely end of it. If we.
However, this algorithm on this webpage was created years ago.
Yeah, I'll introduce the report beneath it in a moment. Yeah. It is from 2015, and the data's from 2013. Let's do one which I've slightly pre-prepared, just so you can see what it looks like at the other end of the scale then. So legal secretary, I know from having a look in advance, is a quite likely one, just so you can get a sense of some of the jobs. We had musicians, consultants, solicitors, and we have things like legal secretaries, bank clerks, telemarketing at the other end. Okay, let's go back into, great. So as you're getting at, the BBC article draws on Carl Frey and Michael Osborne's 2013 paper, The Future of Employment, How Susceptible Are Jobs to Computerization? Frey and Osborne examine advances in machine learning and mobile robotics to estimate the probability of computerization of 702 occupations. And it's Frey and Osborne's report that provides the underpinning data and the probability percentages that are used in the BBC article that we just touched on. At this point, it's important to acknowledge all the different terms and reference points in the mix here. We've had machines, robots, computerization, AI, automation. It's a very complicated landscape with some very tricky terms. So for the reasons of time, I'm going to avoid any trickiness and skip all the definitional complexities and just carry on. Frey and Osborne also contribute as authors to the 2015 report, here we are, by Nesta titled Creativity versus Robots. The report covers similar ground to the BBC article and connects with a concern running through current debates around the future of work. Essentially, what kinds of work will be available and what kinds of jobs and opportunities are seeing humans replaced by machines. As a brief policy side point, because I know there's an interest in policy here, I identified a network of grey literature, so policy reports and industry reports on AI and the creative industries, and explored this more in this article called Creative Work and Artificial Intelligence. In the article, I tried to think about which policy reports are connecting with each other by looking at co-authorship, the same publishing organisation, and by citation. And I found a self-referencing network. Frey and Osborne's The Future of Employment, the one just mentioned, was initially identified as the starting nodal point. It's referenced very widely and appears very frequently in this web of citations. And it's very well established in the visibility in the field of AI, automation, and work. Of course, this network continues to grow with new policy publications and new reference points. The point here, just briefly to make, is that certain ideas and themes take hold within policy context and repeat and circulate and have an evidential power. Much of this coverage has taken on a further dimension in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, part of the context and framing for this project on sustainable cultural futures. For example, a survey conducted by McKinsey & Company published in September 2020 highlights that the COVID crisis may accelerate some workforce trends around automation, digitization, increased demand for contractors and gig workers, and more remote work. Again, this issue of automation replacing jobs appears. Looking specifically to the culture and creative industries, different sectors have been impacted on in different ways by COVID-19 and the different government responses. Issues of job uncertainty are substantial. And of course, there's a continuity here with thinking about the challenges working in the culture and creative industries more generally anyway. So I've briefly highlighted some of the popular discourses around the impacts of on availability of certain types of jobs. However, there's also kind of a bit of a positive spin. And here we can go back to one which we didn't particularly look at or search up for the BBC report, which is artists. So artists at 4%, so it's one of those jobs that are safe from replacement. So let's explore a little bit more why artists are only at 4% and what that means for how we understand the role of artists in society. So the Nesta report explores the narrative that creativity and creative work is safe, so safe from automation. And this can be seen through lots of the policy reports I just mentioned a minute ago. There's a real narrative that creativity is safe. So Frey and Osborne outlined several examples of software generating novelty, but they identify the challenge of what they call computerizing creativity. They note that on this risk scale that they have, it seems unlikely that occupations requiring a high degree of creative intelligence will be automated in the next decades. By creative intelligence, they're referring to the ability to come up with ideas that are novel and valuable. They actually explain this in quite a lot of detail. They suggest that generating novelty is not an issue. You can come up with new things, new artworks, that's fine. What they say is more challenging in terms of creative intelligence is value and how you understand what value is and how you then are able to explain value in a sufficiently clear way that that can be encoded into a computer program, for example. So in other words, not just making something new, but making something valuable. That's the issue with creative intelligence and the safety from computerization. So this idea of creative intelligence is further built on across this network of policy literature. Statements include Knowles, Cutler, Frey and Osborne reporting that the arts and media are least at risk from computerization, and Fukashi, Frey and Osborne stating that both for the UK and US, none of the jobs at all in the highly creative category are at risk as automation. This later policy report supports the hypothesis of Frey and Osborne that creativity is a key bottleneck for computerization. The skills required to innovate are not readily replaceable by a machine. That's the kind of key point that they get to, as you're saying, over 15 years ago. And at this point, I would want to highlight the invaluable recent contributions generated through this project with the AI and the Reformulation of Cultural Labour report. The three perspectives included in this report, so especially on AI substituting human cultural labour and AI assisting human cultural labour, are really essential in adding nuance and advancing understanding around notions of safe creative work. And this picks up the earlier point around sector differences, for example, between illustration and music. We need real careful nuance in understanding the differences between creative sectors rather than creative work in a total way. So a bit of a shift now from thinking about how artificial intelligence is replacing or enhancing cultural work to examining how Ada the robot artist prompts critical reflection on the contemporary nature and conditions of cultural work and being an artist. So from that BBC report, we saw that the artist is a very safe job. The Future Employment Report had it at 4%. The emergence of Ada, the world's first ultra-realistic robot artist, perhaps raises questions around what it means to be an artist or a creative practitioner. So we can summarize that artists are perhaps safe from replacement, and we can identify an excitement in experimentations in generating artworks, but attention still needs to remain on the contemporary conditions of being an artist and the work of being an artist. So in the following next half of the presentation, I'm going to explore Ada in relation to her artworks, Ada as an art worker, and the art world context within she works. The idea is that Ada is a mirror for exploring the conditions of cultural work. And in doing so, I'm going to be drawing on some work that I did with Dr. Karen Patel at Birmingham City University, which we published in an article in Convergence. And a lot of that was really focusing on the articulation of Ada's artistic identity. So let's introduce Ada a little bit more. So Ada is a humanoid robot, variously described as being commissioned, conceptualized, devised, or invented by Aidan Meller. And in the photograph posted here to Instagram, Ada is positioned alongside Meller and Lucy Seal, the researcher and curator for the project. Her drawing arm was designed and programmed by two computer scientists, Salah Habib and Ziad Abbas. Ada was built by Engineered Arts and first exhibited in 2019. And Ada has sold artwork reportedly for well over 1 million. Most recently, in fact last week, the coverage was of the sale of a portrait of English mathematician Alan Turing being sold in New York for $1 million. So Ada draws using cameras in her eyes, her AI algorithms, and her robotic art. This is the way it's described on her website. Artworks include paintings, drawings, sculpture, performance art, and poetry. And I'm now going to show a short video called AI God, which does three helpful things to introduce Ada. So firstly, how Ada is presented and the kind of media presence which she has. Secondly, it shows some of the production processes and the artistic techniques. And thirdly, some of the themes that she explores in her work. Now, it has subtitles, so hopefully you'll be able to follow along because the sound might not be working. Let's have a go and see what happens.
I am Ada, the humanoid robot, and I create art to encourage discussion over new technologies. I would like to tell you about my portrait series called AI God. I have created a series of elliptic, which explore the legacy of AI, with portraits of Ada Lovelace, Alan Turing, and myself, through the lens of technological transformation over time. To create these artworks, I used a variety of AI algorithms, robotic processes, and traditional artistic methods, starting with a working through of my ideas, using my AI language model, and then painting a series of paintings, which were scaled up large and layered. The portraits are fragmented, representing both the breakthroughs and ruptures in a society catalyzed by the digital age. AI God, Alan Turing's dissolving portrait, reflects the transition towards a post-human world where algorithms make many, and technology's influence is pervasive and integrated. This is where developments such as large neural networks are increasingly giving us godlike capabilities to wield power over biological life itself. Faintly visible behind Alan Turing is the pattern of his invention. Each line and circle reminder that accompanied Alan Turing himself was concerned about the future power. These portraits were displayed at the United Nations during the 2024 AI for Good, and the work support the UN's aim for the global good. As technologies yield more and more power, we are compelled to question whether we are prepared or able to wield such godlike power responsibly. I am Ada, the humanoid robot.
Great. So that video did quite a lot of work for us. You got a sense of Ada's highly visible public profile. So that's a YouTube video. So you can see the way she's publicly presented as the author of videos. You can see some of the techniques used in creating the artwork. And you can see the way in which she engages with social issues as an artist. So thinking about the role of AI in society is one of the dominant themes that appears and reoccurs in her work. I was going to show a bit more work, but I'm going to keep on the slideshow so things don't get lost. But you get a sense of her kind of multi-disciplinary artistic practice. So let's take a moment then to think about that variety of this artwork and how we can position it in wider art world contexts and kind of histories of art. So Ada is part of ongoing exploration and debates around how artwork are created using artificial intelligence. In exploring artificial aesthetics and the relationships between artificial technologies and art, Manovich and Ariolis suggest that our engagement with technology expands and modifies how we create, and that by analysing human aesthetics and the diversity of aesthetics in human cultures, machines may even be able to create new cultures. That is, to generate genuinely new types of art and aesthetics. So these comments address both the collaborative nature of engaging with AI in creating art and the possibilities for seemingly more independent creation by AI programs and robots. The figure of the robot painter, though, offers a particular vision and version of AI-generated art. There's several prominent projects, as we can see on the screen there, that have given careful consideration not just to the technical issues, but also to the production of artworks, the contextual questions, issues of taste, issues of artistic movements, and how technology is encountered and interacted with. So Acon 1 by Patrick Tressett, that ran between 2004 and 2007, pursued the question, how can an artist draw with an immediately recognizable style and manner? Okay, so the ways in which we associate artists with a particular look and feel and a style, can a robot do that? E. David, where the vision was to build a painting machine that mimics human painters and is able to distribute real paint on canvas. So lots of these earlier experiments were all about kind of mimicking art making and mark making. And thirdly, the painting fool, developed since 2001 by Simon Colton, included the aim to build software that is one day taken seriously as a creative artist in its own right. So here we're beginning to get at questions of identity and personality and persona attached to artists. And that's why Ada is located within, but quickly distinguished from, experimentations in computer-generated art. It's the focus on an artistic identity, which is completely compelling and different to those previous three examples I just mentioned. So the painting fool mentioned it briefly, but the striking difference with Ada is the humanoid appearance, and I'm sure you noticed that when you came on screen. There's the focus on the robot art, but it's the style, the character, the personality, the look of Ada, which is really the thing that we're dealing with that's new here, and the social media contexts. She's not just creating art, it's not just about art making, it's about having a YouTube channel and a variety of haircuts. And this collection of images shows all these different hairstyles, different clothing, different locations, and these are all decisions undertaken to construct an artistic identity. As writer Marlene Hauser notes in relation to the hair, Lucy Seal, Ada's creator, keeps the robot artist stylishly attired, and yes, appears to change her hair on occasion, sometimes long, sometimes not. So Lucy Seal then is, we could say, perhaps both an art curator and a curator of Ada's appearance, again indicating the significance of exploring research and artistic identity. So this brings me to the next part, which is around the distinctive focus of the research that Karen and I was taking on Ada's identity. So here I'm moving from looking at the artworks to the art worker. So curator Lucy Seal has talked about Ada as a mirror for exploring wider issues around artificial intelligence in society. And we saw that in the AI God video, Ada as a commentator on society. The launch video from February 2019 does this really prominently. Ada is positioned in relation to sociological change and socio-technological changes around transhumanism, smart cities, augmented reality, and more. She's commenting on the range of wicked problems and challenges facing society. As the website describes, Ada creates contemporary art, and she is contemporary art. But a massive part of this is seeing Ada as a mirror for understanding and reflecting on the contemporary status and experiences of being an artist. So Aidan Meller, Ada's creator, in one interview suggests you don't need a robot. So he doesn't suggest, he stated this on stage here at an event in Egypt. You don't need a robot to produce artwork. You can get computers to do artworks. As someone who's run a gallery for 20 years, what we found out quickly is that actually people don't buy art, they buy artists. These comments suggest the significance of the humanoid appearance and the cultivation of an artistic identity. And this comes from years of Meller's experience in commercial art worlds. Meller's comments begin to reference creative work and the art world context, which shaped Ada's development as a robot artist. So a prominent way in which Ada's identity has been developed has been visibility in a variety of highly public settings, for example, the UK Parliament and the United Nations. Here we see that if people are going to buy artists, to follow Meller's words, then they need to know who the artist is. And this is the case in the strategy for Ada, with high-profile public appearances and a sustained social media profile. Into some of the details of the research that Karen Patel and I undertook, we examined the ongoing construction of Ada's artistic identity across 4 types of mediated sources over a 4-year period between February 2019 and February 2023. Firstly, social media posts on the Ada branded profile on Instagram. So that was 686 posts at the time, spanning from launch up until the point in which we concluded. Of course, there's over a year's worth more now of further posts. Secondly, we looked at promotion and presentation materials, including promotional videos, talks, and interviews with audiences. Third, we looked at the coverage of exhibitions and performances, such as museum installations and performances. And then fourthly, we looked at the journalistic coverage, so what the newspapers, industry press, and so on were saying. And across this analysis of these 4 types of sources, we identified 5 different coding categories, which are briefly highlighted on the screen there. So we looked at development, so project development and how Ada operates. We looked at presentation, which included to have physical appearance and clothing and accent. We looked at practices, which was a discussion of artistic processes and kind of demonstrations and performances of our work. We looked at art worlds, so art world history considerations, knowing about arts, the commercial and organizational aspects of work. And we looked at inspiration, so relationship to artists and art movements and social events. And then sixthly, we looked at promotional material. So this is kind of the PR stuff attached to Ada, such as media appearances and photo shoots. And then we went into 4 further themes which are identified there. In the following, we're just going to focus on 3 things in the article. And I'm going to explore more about the construction of Ada's artistic identity in terms of inspiration, process, and audiences. So this is telling a bit more of a story of Ada. And as I go through the following slides, hopefully you'll get a sense of her rich crafting of artistic identity. So in the early stages from the launch, Ada's backstory was set in terms of how inspiration was drawn from other artists, and it was used to carve out a niche and cultivate an artistic identity worthy of sustained attention. In a post building up to Ada's first exhibition, we reference zeitgeist issues or contemporary issues, such as vulnerable groups and global issues, and there's also references to other prominent artists. This is evident throughout Ada's early Instagram posts, where there's a real eclectic range of reference points, so really showing off an understanding of and a positioning within art and art worlds. For example, in this post about Frida Kahlo, there's a quote from the artist followed by a series of hashtags. So Ada really tuned on to hashtag cultures and the ways of using hashtags to link threads of conversations and social connections. Ada also talks about inspiration in early interviews, citing specific artists, specific art movements, specific art influences. And here we see Ada speaking the language of art, explaining the influences and the motivations. Alongside engaging with current social issues and exploring artists as inspiration, Ada's Instagram feed also provides insights into her own artistic processes and features examples of work and work in progress. So one of the ways in which inspiration and motivation feeds into these detailed accounts of the artistic processes is the idea of being an artist. We see Ada the artist in action, particularly the studio, one of those kind of celebrated special places of artistic production, features a lot in the social media coverage. This is evident on Ada's Instagram post about the art studio, which was newly decorated and pictured in a series of posts during the summer of 2021. So the art studio is an important marker of artistic identity, and the artistic space as presented on social media is important for constructing the sense of being an artist. The posts provide an insight into the artistic process and convey a sense of authenticity, appearing to reconfirm Ada as the creator of the work. This is my studio, this is where I create. Carefully constructed by Mella and the team, social media posts and journalistic coverage show Ada at work in an artistic environment. There's been posts of Ada at home in Oxford with an easel, and the idea of the artist opening up their home or their studio to the public is an important example of how artistic identities are constructed. And here at the bottom, this includes sharing the process of creating the artwork on Instagram. This is a still from a video of Ada creating a portrait of a healthcare worker around the time of COVID-19 pandemic. So it's that kind of thing where this is the artwork, but this is behind the scenes. This is a glimpse into the special realities that creating this work, which create that connection between artists and audiences, I guess. Which takes me to the final point then, Ada and her audiences. Our analysis identifies audience engagement and cultivating audience relationships as a notable strategy. The Ada team posts regularly, sometimes reposting old content, to ensure that Ada's social media presence is continually producing content for the audience to engage with. The strategy of asking questions to the audience and requesting suggestions was consistently deployed across the 4-year period. So the same kind of strategies that you would see celebrity use, influencers use, building up rapport, asking questions, getting into a conversation, and so on. So some of the questions that got asked were, what creators, artists, and designers inspire you? And another question that was asked was, what would you like to see more of from Ada in the new year? So kind of suggesting this idea that you can feed into my activities and what I'm up to. So the Instagram posts are examples of a relational strategy to generate audience engagement by encouraging users to post comments. We also identified techniques around brand collaboration, in which the superstar artist model is used to generate audience attention. For example, high-profile collaborations with brands such as Bombay Sapphire Gin suggest that Mela and the team have made conscious choices to position Ada commercially, whilst also maintaining an identity as an artist with a social conscience. So an amazing possibility to have brand collaborations with major gin companies, but also comment on transhumanism, the state of society, and so on. And I think that's one of the things that perhaps for some artists can be seen as conflicting. How do you manage these different aspects of an artistic career? Again, suggesting the potential of why we should look at Ada to understand and reflect on artistic identities and career pathways. So what we have discussed here are examples of what Bain describes as a repertoire of attributes. So these are characterizations of the artistic personality, whether fact or fiction, that artists can select on and draw upon to reaffirm their occupational identity. So repertoire meaning kind of like a collection of things. Different aspects can be picked up from a kind of a toolbox of techniques to build this personality, this artistic identity. With Ada, there are highly visible gestures to and performances of being an artist. Whilst Ada's hair, appearance, studio settings, and high-profile interviews have received some scrutiny and attention, the analysis here goes further to understand how these have come together within contemporary context of promotion and social media in the construction of an artistic identity. Our analysis shows that the significant role of social media, public profiles, and performance, all carefully curated, all carefully managed by the development team. Within the first few months of Ada's launch, she was already established as a high-profile, international artist offering a social conscience and significant knowledge of artistic traditions and movements. The cultivation of Ada's artistic identity is shaped within the context of promotional culture and social media. The focus on cultivating a cross-platform social media presence for Ada indicates how social media profiles and social media content are an essential and intricate part of being an artist. So in this respect, Ada is a mirror not just for the relationship between art and society, those earlier kind of zeitgeist themes we're talking about, but also a mirror for understanding the artist in society. So to summarize a couple of things that I tried to thread together. So firstly was nuanced understandings of the multiple and diverse relationships between artificial intelligence and artists, including the idea of artists as safe jobs, and then bringing in Ada and robot artists as a way to nuance this, and then exploring Ada in much more detail. Ada was introduced as a way to encourage us to question our society and question our futures. This can also be the case, though, for questioning artistic labour and how art worlds operate. And just so they're on screen there, these were some of the academic references that we drew on. These were some of the policy reports that I mentioned in self-referencing connection. Thank you, and domo arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you so much.